Me and Sarah Jane.
Right.
There's, you wrote that with a drum rhythm, didn't you?
Drum box. Well, I've done that on quite a few songs of mine, actually, over the years. This is the first time that it's actually gone on a record with a drum box on it. I don't know, with that I was just trying a lot of different ideas on one rhythm, going through a series of different feels, a lot of which I hadn't sort of explored much before, like the almost sort of reggae feel, which is sort of throughout the song a bit, and then towards the end it sort of changes back to a slightly more traditional feel. But I quite like the idea of swapping between the different rhythms, keeping that one drum rhythm going. And but originally I didn't sort of feel very strongly about having the song as one thing like that, you know, going through a series of about, what, 8, 9, 10 bits. I mean, I was quite happy to take some bits out of isolation and make a song out of them, but the way the rest of the album was going was very much into songs with one mood in them. Like Abacab tends to stick pretty much in one mood, for example, you know. And so I thought it would be a nice idea, I think we all did really in a way, to keep this song going through a series of moods, because it would sort of contrast a little bit with the rest of the album. And it would, you know, it would just be, definitely would stand out for that reason. And I think it works, the idea.
I think the advent, actually, of the drum box in our writing is has been a very positive thing. I mean, like, we all write with drum boxes just purely because if you have a drum box, if you have a rhythm going, you don't play so much. I mean, in the old days, you know, we used to rehearse. I mean, there's 3 walls of sound. There was his wall of sound, there was Tony's wall of sound, there was Steve's wall of sound. We get into a studio and there's no room for the sound, you know. There's me thrashing away as well, and Peter's thick voice. I mean, so now it's like, if you write, you tend to write with the drum box, you leave the spaces because there is a rhythm going.
Also, I think it helps you change something, because in the past, without the drum box, you'd often, well, it's a sort of, we've changed as writers, sort of matured, I think, because we used to stop and start an awful lot in the early days. And yet, if you've got a drum box going, you can actually do that, but the song seems to flow very often more.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't work, but sometimes I think it didn't work, because we were almost too busy. But the drum box helps you to do that, because you can play against it, get the same effect. But it's like the Beatles used to do that, actually. Some of their songs used to do all sorts of weird things, the chords and lines above it, but the drums would kind of plough on. Old Ringo would sort of plough on regardless through it, you know, no one told him.
That song, Abacab, actually reveals a lot about the new Genesis, I find, just in terms of...
Well, simplicity, I think. I mean, not that is the new Genesis, but I mean, it's a very typical example of a tune that was, you know, sprung from nowhere, really, just out of playing in a rehearsal room.
Also, you've got to capture the feeling, because in the past, you know, very often, just the song was arranged technically in such a way that if everyone played the right notes, the song sounded quite good. Whereas now, a lot of songs on Abacab are a lot simpler and rely much more on feel. Unless you capture that, you've got nothing. A good example is Keep It Dark. I mean, it actually sounded good in the rehearsal room, but we got in the studio, and there isn't very much on there. I mean, you know, there's the drum track, and Tony's playing the bass part with his left hand. I was playing one riff the whole way through, virtually. And unless you capture some magic or some feeling, it sounds awful. And we had a couple of goes, and it just wasn't... got to press, it wasn't happening, was it?
Right.
And then suddenly we got it one day, you know, we managed to capture it.
And that's actually something we never really did in the past, you see, because of time. I mean, one gets into a situation where you have studios, you book yourself into a studio, and because we were recording in Sweden or recording in Holland, you get 12 days, you do the backing track, you get the best version you do of that day, the backing track, and that becomes the track, that becomes the definitive version of the song. Now we've got our own place, it's, you know, there is no definitive version, really. There is lots of versions of which suddenly, one day, we'll all agree on that is the one. You know, and the same with the mixes, as opposed to spending all day on the mix, you know, going through the whole song. You've heard it so many times, you don't even know what you want it to sound like in the end. It gets to a point where, you know, you lose a bit of, you know, you spent so much time on it, you have to come out with a product at the end of the day. You have to say that is the mix of the song. And this time we went the other way. We just did lots and lots of mixes of the songs. I see it as a very fresh new thing. I'm very excited by it.
Yes, there's certainly, you can hear
I seem to be the only one.
But I am. Putting the Earth, Wind and Fire horn section into No Reply at All, for example, I mean, that was the first time that you've used outside musicians since your very first album, isn't it?
It was beginning to be the 11th hour, you know. I kept talking about it and nothing solid was happening. And I suggested doing it, and I think Tony quite rightly had some reservations about whether, A, we wanted if there was nothing we could do ourselves, to, you know, like we did on Behind the Lines and Turn It On Again, we actually duplicated or simulated a horn sound for those tunes. Why couldn't we do that? Also, reservation that we might end up sounding not like us, a bit like Earth, Wind and Fire. So rather than bring them all over there, I think Mike picked up a bit on the energy, and so we, you know, I put me money where my mouth was, in a way, and sort of we arranged a studio, got the guys, went over to Los Angeles and put the 2 tunes on the tape and said, this is what we want you to do, and their arranger, Tom Tom, went away, came back with it on paper, and we all sat round and they recorded it, and we changed a few things that we didn't like, you know, or didn't fit, or we thought could be better. But you know, it was one of those things. I think we all liked the aspect of it. It was a big move for us because it was the first time anybody else had played on our albums since Genesis to Revelation, right?
That's right.
It brings a new life to the Genesis trademarks as well, doesn't it? Because the trademarks are all still there if you look for them.
I mean, I think No Reply is a good example of a song that has got a new sort of dimension in it with the horns, yet it still sounds very Genesis, which is, I think, is a good example of how other instruments
it's
can
all a
work.
question of what you concentrate on in a song. I mean, everyone, you know, particularly over in the States, talk about No Reply as being nothing like anything else we've done a lot and things. But really, from my own point of view, I mean, what I'm playing is there's a lot of relationship to what I played on the song The Lamb on Broadway, in the sense it's the same cross-hand technique. And, you know, and I think it's really just you put the brass on and everyone thinks, it's that kind of song, right? So now we'll call it rhythm and blues or something, you know. And so it becomes that. Whereas if we hadn't put the brass on, we've maybe sort of done it a little bit differently. No one would have said that.
It's just one little step towards taking people off automatic pilot, you know, because they do tend to put us in one area, and which we're not afraid to be in, but at the same time we are also in lots of other areas, you know. And you know, they love to think of you over there and Earth, Wind and Fire over there, and you know, Devo there or whatever. And in fact, there's you know, we're not particularly any one particular thing, which sounds pretty aimless, but I mean we're not. You know, we're all writers. Now I can hold my hand up high and say I'm a writer too. But we're all writers and sort of therefore write all different types of music really. And it's I don't think it was trying to get out of that sort of the mould that people tend to put us in. And I think it's happening more nowadays anyway, because we've got a younger audience who are, I suppose, more open to accept more things than our older audience.
It's just because they don't know them as much as anything else. They don't have the preconceived ideas. The first thing a lot of our audience has heard by us in the States is misunderstanding. So they got a different preconception about the group. Okay, a lot of them probably went out and bought the album and discovered that we had, you know, more range than one song. But nevertheless, I mean, they start off with a different kind of preconceived idea, and I think it's very important, you know, that we are able to do that and to, you know, give a different feel.
Do you like that, the fact that you're getting a new audience in?
Well, as long as you know, I like
go back as far as the Lamb.
Yes, that doesn't. I mean, I think that's good. I think it's good. Also, hopefully, you keep some people, old people as well. I know some people who think this album is our best album since things like the Lamb in many ways, because it is a very positive album, and we seem to know. You know, I don't know. We felt very confident about this album. More confident, in my opinion. I felt more confident about this album than the last 2, definitely. And I think in a way that a fan who kind of has liked most of what we've done in the past is still going to like this, because after it's our own taste. We've still got our own judgment. That's the only filter it's going through.
It's going against the general trend, though, because when you've been around as a band for a decade or more, and bands tend to harden, when their arteries tend to harden, if you like, as they go on. Whereas you've, as it were, broken out.
We've been fortunate with these changes, you know. Yeah, I mean the changes obviously within the group has really made us not feel like we've been around for about 10 years, to be honest. I mean, I reckon the group. Again, it's all different. I mean, we're all in this for different reasons, in a way, I guess, because we only ever find out what the other person's reasons are when we do interviews with the 3 of us. But I mean, I consider this to be a different group from even the one that did Duke, you know, just because of the attitudes. And maybe I'm wrong, but the attitudes within ourselves of
how do you feel
my observation.
I just feel over the last album.
Well, I mean, obviously,
just between Duke and...
To be honest, I'm so glad the way we're doing things now, you know, we know, with our own place, our attitudes towards each other, our attitudes towards how the music is written and recorded.
We work, I mean, in the studio, I really think it's not easy to produce three of you produce yourselves. But it works very well. There's no sort of, there are no taboo areas anymore.